All right, I'm going to explain the setup we have here a little bit. Here's our book with clean, dry hands. This is just a stack of cardstock. I don't know exactly how many pieces here, maybe 5. It's to create something that we can rub against that isn't as hard as this cutting board that has a little bit of give to it, okay? Because we want something that'll absorb our pressure a little bit and allow the paper to stretch a little bit, because that's what we're trying to do. This tool that we're using is actually for clay sculpting. It's for sculptors to tool clay, and it's a great little tool for working deep divots or creases out of the paper. So how do we do this? We have silicone release paper or parchment paper over top of our cardstock. We have the book. We have a smaller piece of parchment paper, and what we're going to do is we're going to identify the spot. This is the spot that we're interested in working. We can see it here and kind of get an idea for where it is on the other side. If we use the light to our advantage, we can see that divot from the other side. I'm going to take our tool and we're going to rub the tool, not directly on the paper, but with the SRP in between the tool and the paper so that the tool can glide over the paper without grabbing it. And we're going to work. This is actually like a high point, a raised point on this end, because on the front of the book, it's a low point. It's a scratch, essentially, that doesn't necessarily break cover. So it's kind of a trench. If it's just a dot, maybe you would call it a divot, but it's actually like a line. So an indentation. And an indentation on the front is a raised part on the back. So what we're doing is we're using this tool to push that raised part down so that it won't be a indentation on the front. Okay? And we're just doing right now some initial work to do an initial little stretch of the paper, try to get it closer to its original state. Okay, so what we've done now is we've stretched it a little bit. It's going to look a little bit like a dome now from this side, and then what we're going to do is put a little bit of heat into it. So there's the spot. Tack iron again set on about 2. We're just going to put a little bit of heat into that area. Now I happen to know just from experience with a divot like this, with this kind of indentation, it's going to take more than just what we just did. So it already looks better, but it's going to take more than that. So another thing that we can do and should do is we want to add a little bit of humidity to that spot. Humidity plus heat plus pressure, we can fix that. So how are we going to do that? I am going to take one of these cotton rounds that I showed you before. I have a spray bottle with pure distilled water in it, and I'm going to spray it off camera, but I'm just going to give it a tiny squirt like that. I'm only spraying it off camera because I don't want to get water on my work surface. Okay, so what I've done is I've just misted this. You can see there's no, it's not saturated with water, it's just misted. And now I'm gonna sort of spread that around so it's not just misted on the surface, but it's kind of absorbed in a little bit. If I feel it with my finger, it does feel damp, but just barely. Okay, in fact, I think I could use just a little bit more. So I just put a little bit, one more little misty squirt on it. There's a little bit of water on my fingers. I'll absorb that into the cotton round. Okay, now I know that this direction that I creased it, that's the side that's wet. I'm going to just set it there for a moment. And I'm going to heat this area up. So our indentation is right here and runs that way. It's worse. This is the worst spot and it goes up that way. So I'm going to put some heat into it. This heat will help move the water into the paper as well, because the heat will be transferred into the water when we touch it. So I'm going to press this on that spot, and I can feel the heat almost immediately from the book through the water, through the cotton round and into my finger. So I know that it's mobilizing that water and it's moving it into that area. I'm going to go ahead and put a little more heat to help drive that water into the paper and to keep it warm and to make it more pliable. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to fairly quickly flip this page and work that spot again with the hand tool. And what we'll see is the paper is going to take that pressure a little bit better because it has a little higher water content and it's a little warmer. So the paper is just easier to move with our tool. If you want higher pressure, use this end of the tool, but you should use it very carefully because it is easy to make an indentation the other direction if you're not careful. So I use this in tight spaces, very controlled, with not a lot of pressure, and then I always follow back up with this to kind of smooth out any indentation I may be making the other direction with the smaller ball. That smaller ball obviously allows you to put more force into the paper, more pressure, I should say. Your force is fixed, your surface area is smaller, so the pressure's higher. And the pressure is what the paper experiences. Okay. I think that's all we want to do on that, but while I'm doing that, I notice there's another spot right here, which is another divot, sort of associated with this one. And I was going to find it on the front first and point it out, come back here and get it, but since I see it right from this side, I'm just going to go ahead and hit it right now. Okay. So we've got both of those areas addressed, and then this is ready now to just go in the press. I could press it again with the tack iron, but I found that that's unnecessary, and just putting it right in the press will pull that paper in line, allow it to contract again as it cools, and flatten that area out. So I'm going to move on to the other area that we identified that needs work here, and that is the back of this crease and a little bit here, this crease and that one. Not much there to do. I will go ahead again because it's easy and I can see it. I'll go ahead and do a little work on this one right now. It's always good to start off with low pressure. Check your work kind of early and often. I don't expect a lot of improvement on this. As I mentioned before, I just want to help the paper lay a little bit better. Let me get a good angle here for this one. And we are still going to clean that. I'll clean that after we're done doing this working because I don't want to get eraser crumbs all over this stuff. So I think I'll do that cleaning on camera since we skipped it the other day. Again, the purpose of this is just to help this corner lay down a little flatter. So I think water is really going to help with this one. I'm just going to work it a little bit here. And then we're going to go to this side, put some heat in it, put a little bit of water into it. Again, I don't feel like there's quite enough dampness here because I can't quite feel it in my fingers. I'm going to give it another tiny mist and fold it so that I'm not putting water directly, but, or not, you know, droplets, but rather just a damp cotton round. We'll put a little more heat, which will help move the water into the paper from the cotton round. Okay, some more heat. These will move these water molecules through the paper more rapidly than if we didn't use heat, partly why it works better. And then we'll go ahead and work on this side of it again. There's where the line is. Okay, I like that. There's a little crease right here. I don't think it's going to need heat or water. It's very small, but we take it and we just put a little pressure into it. When we do the next press on the book, it's going to just eliminate it completely. Okay, so there's those two things we said we were going to work on. And now we work on the same kinds of issues with this cover. Now, what we're going to do, this is ink transfer from here. That's why that's dark there, right? So if we were to just take this here and put pressure, we're going to encourage more ink transfer from here to here. So because we have a double cover, we need to take an additional precaution here. We need another piece of SRP between these two covers. So I'm going to grab a piece now. And we're going to work on that divot that is right here. Indentation, I suppose. I keep saying divot, but it's really more of an indentation. And there's a little bit here and here. So let's see if it's just as easy to see from this side on this cover. And it is, which is good for us. We're going to go ahead and do our initial work on that. Interestingly, because the covers are off register just a tiny bit, the place where this divot shows up on the artwork is shifted a little bit from where it was on the first cover, or on the outer cover, I should say. Not sure which one should be called the first cover. Should the inner cover be called the first cover? It was the first one that went on the outer wrap. Or should the first one that you see be called the first cover? Probably confusing. Let's call them inner and outer covers. Okay. I think that's pretty good for a first pass on that. Not sure if we want to do heat from this side on that. I'm going to look at it I actually think that's going to press out pretty well without adding additional humidity or heat. But I do see a few other small creases on this cover. This is the cover that's going to get us our grade. So it's worth, because as you know, CGC grades both covers, but then the overall grade that they award is the highest of the two, which in my experience is almost always the inner one because it's protected, obviously. I guess it wouldn't have to be that way. If somebody had defaced the inner one, then maybe the outer cover would be the grade that you got. But practically, you might as well think of it as the inner cover is your grade, especially on this book. So it is worth getting every tiny little divot out of this one, because a half point on this cover is going to give us a half point on our overall grade, right? So on the outer cover, we have color breaking creases. We have some other issues that are just never going to, you know, we're sort of never going to get a grade. I mean, that's never going to be an 8.0, right? We're limited to a certain degree. On this inner cover, we don't have nearly as many defects, and the defects we have are not quite as bad. So we have more potential to pick up here on this inner cover. So it's worth spending more time with the hand tooling on this inner cover than it is on the outer cover, because of the overall limitation to the grade on the outer cover. All right. We can work that same line up here a little bit. It's very minor on the inner cover though, so much so that it's actually difficult to see even exactly where it is. So I'm just going to work very gently across here. Okay, so we've done our hand tooling, which means we are finished with these. We are finished with my tack iron, so I'm going to turn that off right now. I'm going to set these aside. I am going to go ahead and work on that cleaning that we identified that needs to be done here.